Good morning. Good morning. Dzień dobry. This is my privilege to welcome you all in this international webinar, which is being held by the Asiatic Society in collaboration with the Institute of Oriental Studies, Jagiellonian University, Krakow, Poland, in association with Honorary Consulate of Poland in Kolkata, India. I welcome you all on behalf of the Council of the Asiatic Society, which, as you know already, the oldest institution of learning and research, not only in our country, in India, it is in the whole of the continent of Asia, the oldest institution or seat of learning, which was established in 1784. Now today's subject, as has already been circulated, status of cultivation of Sanskrit as a language in Poland and India. Let me first of all formally address our President, Professor Shapun Kumar Pramanik, the President of the Asiatic Society, who will shortly join. Our guest of honor, Mr. Mohan Goenka, Honorary Consul of Poland in Kolkata, and Vice Chairman, Imami Group. The chief guest, Dr. Sebastian Domjalski, Chargé d'Affaires, Embassy of Poland in Delhi. Our speakers today, Professor Alina Marlovich, Head of the Department of Languages and Cultures of India and South Asia, Institute of Oriental Studies, Jagiellonian University, Krakow, Poland. Our speaker, Professor Iona Milewska, Associate Professor, Department of Languages and Cultures of India and South Asia, Institute of Oriental Studies, Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland. Professor Tapati Mukherjee, Vice President of the Asiatic Society, Kolkata, and also the President, Sanskrit Sahitya Parishad, Kolkata. Our fourth speaker, Professor Dr. Srikant S. Bahulkar, Adjunct Professor, Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies, Savitribai Phule, Pune University, and Chief Investigator, Bhagavat Purana Project of Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, Pune. Unfortunately, just a few minutes back, we have received a mail from him. He has fallen sick suddenly, right at the moment, indisposed, can't take part today, but I will take the permission of the chair to read out his abstract that has been circulated. Mr. Joydeep Rai, Chief Consul Officer, Honorary Consulate of Poland in Kolkata. Professor Ashok Karti Shannal, who is online with us. He is the acting treasurer of the Asiatic Society, Kolkata, who will propose a vote of thanks at the end. And the distinguished scholars, participants online from various parts of the country here and also in Poland. Good morning to all, as I have already indicated, and Dzień dobry. Sir William Jones, the founder president, while delivering the third anniversary discourse on 2nd February 1786, mentioned, I quote, "The Sanskrit language, whatever be its antiquity, is of a wonderful structure, more perfect than the Greek, more copious than the Latin, and more exquisitely refined than either. Yet, bearing to both of them a stronger affinity, both in the roots of verbs and in the forms of grammar, than could possibly have been produced by accident. So strong, indeed, that no philologer could examine them all three without believing them to have sprung from some common source which perhaps no longer exists." Professor Radha Vallabh Tripathi, an eminent scholar, during his presentation on rewriting the history of Sanskrit literature in a two-day international seminar on future of Indology organized at the Asiatic Society, Kolkata in early 2000, discussed at length how in the early 19th century some of the European scholars got involved in the cultivation of this language. Professor Vishwanath Banerjee, the former president of the Asiatic Society, in his paper presented at a conference in April 1994 in collaboration with the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, Kolkata, observed that William Jones's English translation of Kalidasa's Shakuntala, a drama, created a stir among the intelligentsia in the West, particularly in Germany, and it was thought that the mind and character of a nation was brought to life before them, unquote. He also mentioned that Sanskrit was the language of all sciences in ancient India, and Buddhist teachers also used Sanskrit officially in their disputes and discourses, unquote. Professor R.N. Dandekar, in his paper published in the Journal of the Asiatic Society in 1985, had highlighted substantially on the researches done in the West on various aspects of the studies on Sanskrit. Very recently, through a video post, one has learned on the similarities of certain words in Lithuania with Sanskrit. In the backdrop of what has been said so far, the Asiatic Society has decided to open a dialogue between the scholars of Poland and India. In fact, this is the second academic online program with them. The earlier one was on the studies of ancient cities in Poland and India. The two cities from each country were taken up for discussion. Courtesy to His Excellency the Ambassador of India and Mr. Joydeep Rai, Chief Consul Officer, Honorary Consulate of Poland in Kolkata, that we have been able to conduct such an internationally important bilateral studies on certain areas of common academic interest. Hope to continue with this endeavor in future also. Thank you, Jinkuya. And our president has just joined. Professor Shakun Kumar Pramanik is here.
Hello. Welcome everybody. So let the program continue.
Yeah, thank you. No problem.
Mr. Roy, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Chakrabarty, for the wonderful introduction and all the various inputs that you have provided for this webinar. In fact, as you rightly pointed out, we have had two sessions, two webinars. Basically, the earlier one was in February last year when we organized this again with the International Cultural Center in Krakow. That also was in Krakow, and we talked about two Indian cities and two Polish cities, Katowice and Krakow and Ujjain and Varanasi from the Indian side. Today's webinar is more about understanding Sanskrit and how it has impacted relations in Poland, and what kind of studies are going on, what amount of research is going on. In fact, I was just going through some documents more as a layman, and found that, as way back in 1600s, there were Polish nobles who had come to India, and there was a translation of Bhagavad Gita from Sanskrit into the Italian language and later on into the other things. But that's just a small thing. But I think today's session is going to be very interesting because, with to get an insight about how much Sanskrit has penetrated into Poland. And in fact, we have two great professors from the Jagiellonian University, Professor Halina Malevich and Professor Ayana Leshka, who would be talking about it. And I would rather be a student today than rather, try and talk like an expert and say things which probably is not my cup of tea. So I would really like to sit down, watch, listen, hear, understand, and imbibe a lot of things which are so important. And this is a thing. But the most important thing, just to give you a rundown of the program, we will have the Honorary Consul of Poland in Kolkata, Mr. Mohan Goenka, giving his welcome address, and then the inaugural address by Dr. Domzalski, the presidential address by Professor Shapan Kumar Pramanik, the presidential address of the Asiatic Society, and of course we'll have the speakers from Poland, Professor Halina and Professor Ayana. Unfortunately, Professor the professor, Professor Shrikant Bahulkar is unable to join in, but I'm sure his paper would be read out today. So without any further ado and without wasting any more time, let us get down to some learning, and I would love to hear all of you. And with this very few words, may I request Mr. Mohan Goenka, the Honorary Consul of Poland, to say a few words, give his welcome address, whichever you put it. Thank you so much. Mr. Mohan Goenka, please. You're on mute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon for those of you joining in from India, and a very good morning to those from Poland. Very happy to be present at this seminar today amongst such a galaxy of experts from both India and Poland. I believe that today's webinar will go a long way in understanding the linguistic Sanskrit in Poland, where it is taught and researched extensively. The relationship between our countries have been growing significantly, and it is the socio-cultural connects that help in strengthening the bonds of friendship and building bridges of cooperation. I would like to thank the Asiatic Society Kolkata, Jagiellonian University Krakow, Dr. Sebastian Domzalski, Charge d'Affaires of the Embassy of Poland in New Delhi, and particularly Joydeep Rai, Chief Consular Officer of our Honorary Consulate in Kolkata, for conceptualizing and facilitating this webinar. The idea of such collaborative projects between Poland is a step in the right direction to further the socio-cultural relationship, which is equally important alongside trade and business initiatives. I am sure that such webinars and possibly more in-person seminars in the near future would help in strengthening the academic cooperation between such reputed institutions in Poland and India. We from the Honorary Council of Poland in Calcutta are always eager to facilitate such programs that can help in strengthening the ties between our two beautiful countries. I do not wish to take up much of your time, but thank the organizers once again for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts about this interesting webinar taking place today. It is really heartening to see such reputed professors from Poland and India who would be sharing their knowledge and insights about Sanskrit and its advent as an important language of study. Let this webinar pave the way for many other interesting programs which we must endeavor to organize in the months ahead. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you. Jadip, you are on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Goenka. And as always, it's very inspiring. And I must add that Mr. Goenka has always been very supportive in any of the initiatives that we have tried to take on behalf of the Honorary Consulate. And he has always said, "Ki just go ahead and do it, and just make sure that the relationship between Poland and India and from this part of the country it continues to grow." And I think it has grown over the years. I've been associated with the consulate for almost 15, 16 years, and it's been a honor. It's been a lovely journey, and I'm still learning. And I think the relationship is continuously growing. I think most importantly, I think today's seminar is very. I think today's webinar is very relevant because we just had the World Sanskrit Day on 31st of August. So I think when the world recognizes such a language, today's webinar would definitely be one step in the right direction to explore the possibilities and the learnings from there. So again, with those few words, may I now request Dr. Sebastian Domzagalski, Charge DFS of the Embassy of Poland in New Delhi, to give his inaugural address, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished professors, guests, and participants. Let me start by thanking the Asiatic Society in Calcutta and the Institute of Oriental Studies, Jagiellonian University, for organizing this seminar. I also wish to thank Mr. Mohan Goenka, Polish Honorary Consul in Kolkata, for facilitating this seminar. And last but not least, I wish to acknowledge the role of Mr. Joydeep Roy, our Chief Consular Officer, in bringing us here today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to open this special event. As Mr. Joydeep Roy already indicated, it's very important and it's timely meeting coinciding with the World Sanskrit Day. For me personally, it's a pleasure to see another platform of academic cooperation between Poland and India to being open to wide participation. Before I proceed, I actually wanted to say something about myself. I introduce myself a bit also. I'm currently based in Delhi, as you see, and I arrived in India a month ago. I was in India before. I spent 5 years working with Mr. Mohan Goenka and Mr. Joydeep Roy between 2010 2015. But after leaving India, I was in Warsaw, and I came here. To India directly from China, and I decided to do something unusual today. So instead of, I'll be talking a little bit about India and India-Polish relations. I thought that I'll share some personal experience of mine and experience from my stay in China. I wanted to do it a bit to tease my Polish and Indian colleagues, but also I think this my personal experience. It's very subjective, of course, but I think it's also has some relevance for our studies and academic cooperation. 4 years ago, when I was going to China, I heard about the concept of Weiji, concept of a crisis. Chinese word. Can you? I think there is someone whom we should
Not controlling. So Asiatic Society person, if the concerned person can mute everybody.
Okay. So 4 years ago, I heard while going to China, preparing myself, I've heard about the Chinese word crisis that consists of two words. And word danger, crisis is a danger, but it's also an opportunity. Yes? That's how Chinese define, I've heard that that's how Chinese define this term. So a crisis, it's a danger, and there is in every danger, every crisis, there is some opportunity. And I was very unlucky in China because I came 3 months before COVID started. And it was a huge crisis all over the world. And in every crisis, as Chinese teach us there is an opportunity, and this opportunity was a kind of a transformation that happened in our contacts, people to people contacts. We had to go online, and had to rely on some other means of communication. And partly thanks to COVID, I think our today's seminar is actually possible, because before COVID we could not have imagined something, some kind of this kind of cooperation. So, but there is one more aspect to this. This is not only why I'm talking about this Weiji concept, so concept of a Chinese concept of a crisis, because crisis that I thought was a danger and opportunity. That's what I was taught. But while in China, I've actually learned that it's not true. It's a misconception. So it's actually Chinese word crisis consists of danger and words danger and opportunity, but it has many other meanings, and it's probably an English-speaking word misconception popularized by President Kennedy. So, and then there is one more aspect to why I'm telling you this story, is that, you know, there is an important role of academia, scholars, experts in understanding each other and bridging the gap between the cultures, because there are a lot of misconceptions. And, you know, here in the embassy, we understand that in order to be successful in what we do, we need to have this kind of a broader understanding, a deeper understanding of our history, our languages, so to avoid this kind of traps of misconceptions. And that's why this kind of gatherings, seminars, are very important. They are important if they happen in physical form, but they are also important if they happen online. So with this, I would like to thank the organizers again, and underline that we all know this. I think all the participants know this, but it's still worth stating that Polish academia has a long-standing tradition of interest in Indology and the study of Indian languages, including Sanskrit. And as a matter of fact, Sanskrit has been studied at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow since the establishment of a church of Sanskrit in 1893. So it's more than 100 years. And although younger than its counterpart in Krakow, we also have Indology department in Warsaw, and we also have interest. Other universities and other academic institutions also deal with, are interested in studying Indic languages, literature, and culture. And our role now in the embassy is to focus more on people-to-people contacts. That's very important. That's a huge role for academia. And from my side, I see a growing interest in students, and of course professors in visiting India. Polish scholars wanting to come to India, but what I also see is and this is what we see here on the ground, is a huge interest in Indian students wanting to study in Poland. And this is something that we will be supporting, and I would like to thank everyone for facilitating this, supporting, because this is, we observe it from the consular perspective, from the visa sections, but there is a huge, I mean, this is done by the respective universities and academic institutions. So thank you very much. One last remark is that next year we will be celebrating officially 70 years of diplomatic relations between Poland and India. And I would like to encourage everyone to join in the celebrations, to organize seminars, events of this celebrating our bonds and ties. Thank you very much, and I wish you all fruitful conversation.
Proposal, most welcome proposal. We'll look into it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Domzalski. That was once again very interesting. A lot of fascinating insights about the Chinese way of working and seeing danger and opportunity in the same way. And I think, as you rightly said, we need to have more programs, more physical programs in the coming months. And since next year is going to be 70 years of diplomatic relations between India and Poland, I am sure that many more such programs would be organized. Many more interesting programs will be organized. And of course, with the support of Consul Goenka and our honorary consulate, we will be happy to uh, uh, extend our support and whatever possibilities and in organizing these programs. So thank you once again, and with that, now I now request Professor Shapan Kumar Pramanik, the President of the Asiatic Society, to give his presidential address, please. Thank you.
Hello. Good morning, everybody.
Good
My
morning.
dear colleague here in Asiatic Society, Dr. S.P. Chakraborty, who is the General Secretary of the Asiatic Society, Mr. Jaideep Rai, who is the Chief Consular Officer and Honorary Consulate of Poland in Kolkata, and who has been the principal person in organizing this seminar, Mr. Mohan Goenka, who has kindly agreed to provide his welcome address here, Dr. Sebastian Gonzalski, Charge d'Affaires Embassy of Poland in New Delhi, who has just now given his inaugural address. My colleague here, Professor Tapati Mukherjee, and other speakers who must be present online but not visible at the moment, and other persons who are participating through online program. Friends, as it has already been said, this is the seminar on status of cultivation of Sanskrit as a language in Poland and India. Our General Secretary has mentioned in his welcome address that this is the second such cooperative endeavor between Asiatic Society and Poland. The first one being organized about a couple of years back, which was a comparative assessment of the old world urbanization. 4 cities were taken up, 2 from India and 2 from Poland, for a comparative assessment of their origin and evolution. Now this is the second such endeavor, joint endeavor on the part of Asiatic Society and the Consulate of Poland or Government of Poland, which is, as already stated, on the status of cultivation of Sanskrit language. Now when we use the word status, it may indicate 2 things. One is the issue of the origin and evolution of the language of Sanskrit in India, and also its cultivation in Poland. That may be the first issue. And the second related issue is the situation of the language at the present moment, how it is being cultivated, being developed in the 2 countries of India and Poland. From the abstracts which have been given to us by the 4 speakers of this conference, we get an idea that both these issues will be covered by the speakers who are present in this seminar. Friends, as you know, Sanskrit is one of the oldest languages of the world. I don't say it is the oldest, but one of the oldest. How old it is? There is some debate, some controversy on the issue. But there is one agreement on the point that it must be more than 4,000 years old. One of the oldest languages in the world, earlier languages being Sumerian or Egyptian, like that. How Sanskrit originated, there is a lot of scholarly discussion on this issue. There is one opinion, I should not say the only opinion, but one opinion is that the oldest mother language in this respect was Indo-Iranian, which had its origin in Persia, in Middle East, Central Asian countries, from which two linguistic groups branched out. One of them migrated to Europe, European countries, and gave birth to Indo-European languages like Greek, Latin, etc. And another branch of the mother Indo-European language branched out in India, came to India through the northwest, and they have subsequently been identified as Indo-Aryans. So these Indo-Aryan people, they have, according to one opinion I must dare say, they have given birth to the language which is now known as Sanskrit language. Now here also there is some controversy because there is the old Sanskrit language and the new Sanskrit language, like that. But we are not entering into this controversy as it is beyond the pale of this seminar to deal with this aspect. But having said that, is Sanskrit the oldest prevalent language in India? I have some hesitation in confirming to this proposal, because according to available resources, maybe that not Sanskrit but Tamil is the oldest language prevalent in India. But Sanskrit comes next to that. And as I've already said that it is more than 4,000 years old. And when the Indo-Aryans came here in India, about 2000 to 150 BC, it was at that time that Sanskrit in its present form started to develop, as we find it from the earliest Vedic treatises. And it is through this branch, through religious scriptures, that Sanskrit had its full development in India. And it was during this period, starting from say 2000 BC, subsequently up to at least 1000 AD, the language had its full-fledged development, covered not only the religious scriptures, but also encapsulated, included within the scope of discussion, scope of interest, such diverse areas of intellectual activity as literature, as environment, ecology, as medicine, as fine arts, sculpture. I mean, all these intellectual exercises which were made in India for the first 1000 years before Christ and the next 1000 years after Christ, I think it was during this period that the language of Sanskrit was at its full development in India, the fruits of which we are enjoying even at the moment. Why I am saying 1000 AD? Because approximately after that period, approximately, cultivation of Sanskrit language and literary works in Sanskrit language began to decline in India. Here and there, off and on, there are some evidences, but there was no systematic endeavor, systematic development of this language or intellectual exercise through this language in India starting from around 1000, 1200 AD and subsequently. It was only after the British people came, I'm somewhat doubtful whether I can use the word British colonialism, but it was due to the endeavor of the first batch of rulers here in India that they turned their attention to our indigenous Sanskrit language, and systematically they began to take initiatives in the development of this language, in the cultivation of this language. And it was only through their endeavor, which was aptly corroborated by the indigenous scholars here in India at the same time, that we are now enjoying the fruits of the language here. So this is briefly the evolution of the language in India. Why I am saying that I have mainly dropped out the about 400, 500 years or 600 years after 1000 BC, because that was almost a dark period as far as the development of the Sanskrit language is concerned. We have scholars here who will give their opinion, and maybe that I will be contradicted. I'm not very sure. I do not belong to the discipline. But that is my broad idea, rough idea about how it works. And one reason why there was a decline in Sanskrit language during this period was that it was denied that type of royal patronage. And the cultivation of the language essentially became localized in character through tolls and other areas, and there was that macro perspective was missing. Is Sanskrit the mother tongue of any group of people living in India? I have some doubts. And maybe that I am of the opinion that Sanskrit has never been the mother tongue of any indigenous group here in India. It developed through the elites. It was an elitist language, as it was, according to Vedic formulation, it was the language of God, quote unquote. And it was this language through which conversations were made by gods, and so it had a supernatural type of orientation that way. But as far as the depth and wealth of the language is concerned, the mode of expression of the language, we have no doubt in saying it is the most developed form of language, because any type of idea would be developed and was developed in early India, traditional India, through this language. I don't have much of opinion, much of knowledge about the status of Sanskrit in Poland. Just now I have heard that it started being cultivated from around 16th, 17th centuries in Poland. But we know it for certain that it was largely through the endeavors of some foreign scholars, either living in India or being interested in India, that they developed this language, that they started cultivating this language. And about them, I must first of all mention the endeavor of Sir William Jones, who was the founder of the Asiatic Society. Sir William Jones was one of the first person who became interested in the language, in Sanskrit language, and systematically started his learning endeavor in Sanskrit while coming here to India, in order to have an idea about the old world civilization in India, and that he did successfully. And that tradition continued in Asiatic Society for a considerable number of time. We know that when the British rulers in the 18th century were taking endeavors to develop educational situation in India, one of the hottest item of debate for them was which one should be the medium of instruction. There are some among them, some scholars who are associated with the Asiatic Society itself, who are of the opinion that it is through Sanskrit that the future education policies could be developed in India. While others, another type of opinion propagated by Ramon Roy and others, that it must be English, not Sanskrit. But that does not mean English was adopted as the official language for the educational development, educational policy. But that does not mean that Sanskrit was neglected, because from that time started a systematic cultivation of the language of Sanskrit here in India, and it was starting from the early 19th century or late 18th century that we Indians became aware of the immense treasure which we had inherited through Sanskritic literature of India's golden past. So I can say that there has been a revival of interest in Sanskrit in subsequent period. About the situation in Poland, we will hear during the course of the day the deliberations of the two Polish scholars who will present their papers here. I have gone through the abstracts submitted by them, but that will give an idea how, being influenced maybe by German and English people, they also started taking up Sanskrit as one language for cultivation. And for the last 200 years in Poland, they are taking systematic endeavors for the development of Sanskrit language. So that was a thing, at least which was unknown to me. And I think that will be one positive result of this seminar. It's enlightening us about the state of cultivation of Sanskrit in Poland as of now. I'll not take much more time, but there is one issue related with the status of cultivation of Sanskrit. The issue is relating to the future of Sanskrit. Whether systematically creative literature will continue to be produced in Sanskrit language is for us to observe the phenomenon, because we are not very sure about the future. But those who had earlier of the opinion that the Sanskrit language has no future, I think they are giving a second thought over the issue. Because there has been a systematic revival of interest in Sanskrit of late in India, and also maybe, I'm not sure, in Poland also. And that will immensely strengthen the bridge between Poland and India. And if there is one area of success of this seminar to which we can look forward to, is that we'll be able to know each other through this seminar, that how one such principal language is being developed by the two countries. I hope, I'm looking forward, because this seminar, just like Mr. Joydeep Rai has stated that this is a learning endeavor for him. To me also this is a learning endeavor, because I am looking forward to what the conclusions of this seminar will be like. So with this, I thank everybody for participation in this seminar, and I hope and I wish this seminar will be a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pramanik. That was really very detailed and a lot of historical perspectives which you brought to the presentation, or other disposition which you made. Your talk in itself was a lot of learning, actually. So, and a lot of things which many of us don't know really, and I'm sure all this would be taken into consideration while going forward and analyzing the subject. So again, without any further ado, and in the interest of time, I would like to invite our first speaker for this session, Professor Halina Malevich, who is the head of the Department of Languages and Cultures of India and South Asia, the Institute of Oriental Studies at the Jagiellonian University, Krakow, Poland. So her abstract, I am not going to go into the details of her resume because that will again take up some time, but she's going to talk about the cultivation of Sanskrit as a language in Poland back into the future. So Professor Halina, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would also like to very shortly thank you to the Asiatic Society for inviting us to take part in this particular, very interesting to us event. And thank you, of course, primarily to you, Joydeep, because you are the person who facilitated our connection. So I am very grateful for that. And I'm also grateful, of course, to Mr. Mohan Goenka, who supports you in all your endeavors with that regard. And thank you all being present here. And without us, let me use the phrase of Joydeep and Shakespeare, without much ado, I will turn to my presentation. I hope you hear me all
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
You can hear me. And I will try to turn on my presentation. I hope that this will also be a success. Let me just check whether I will be able to do that. I think I have to just give me a little bit time to do that. Sorry, I don't know whether I will know how to show the presentation, because I have never used it. Oh, it seems that I will not be able to do that. I don't want to prolong this problems because of my problems with technicalities. Let me see. No, I can't understand the choices that the Google Meets give me, so I'm sorry. I will decide to not to. Yes? I don't know. Okay. Well, I will decide to simply speak, because I don't want to really waste more of your time on my technical problems. So, in my proposition of the topic for the present seminar, I have suggested this. I am making a short explanation before turning to the main topic, that I shall refer to subjectively chosen 2 or maybe 3 case studies in which I shall try to show the areas of the interest of the younger 21st century generation of Sanskrit students at the Jagiellonian University. But since then, I have slightly modified, not slightly, but I would say largely modified the way in which I want to present the possible impact of the interest of our students on the future of Sanskrit studies. And now it took a form of a sort of a preliminary report in which I try to analyze a bigger data regarding the directions in which Sanskrit studies may evolve. And before I turn to the topic itself, I would like to make some reservations about the content of my talk. First of all, I'm in no position to talk about cultivation of Sanskrit as a language in Poland in general, as I am just one person who stands among many of academicians from 4 academic centers in Poland, where Sanskrit as a linguistic career of cultural tradition is being taught. So the 4 centers are situated in the 4 chief academic cities in Poland, which are Wrocław, Poznań, Warszawa, and Kraków. And therefore, I decided to talk only about Sanskrit studies conducted at my faculty of philology at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, because I think that about this I can talk with more the certainty as to what could be the direction of our cultivation of Sanskrit. And I have divided my presentation or my talk in 3 parts. In the first part, I shall briefly discuss the meaning of the word cultivation, not of the status, because the status is quite simple when it comes to Poland. The language is being taught at the academic centers. But what does it mean actually to cultivate something? And for that purpose, I have tried to clarify and well, maybe enlarge implication of cultivation as such, and well, enrich it with a cloud of ideas that can be associated with what it means to cultivate. In the second part, I shortly sketch the historical context of Indology, but really very shortly, at my university, at the Jagiellonian University. And this step taken back into the history of my department, I consider necessary in order to place Krakowian cultivation of Sanskrit in a historical perspective. This can in turn allow us to recognize a tendency towards either preserving certain traditions in cultivating some areas of Sanskrit studies, or maybe it can show the tendency, or it can show both the tendency also to develop and introduce new research fields. And in the third and last part of my report, I shall shortly discuss possible future directions of Sanskrit studies. And since it would be most unwise on my part to discuss the possible developments of the research of my present departmental colleagues who work in the field of Sanskrit studies, I decided to choose a safer as well as a less trodden path of following into the steps of our students. Before turning to these short 3 parts of my presentation, I wanted to add a little general, let us say, remark regarding a situation of Poland in regard to the absorption of cultures, other cultures, well, from the so-called Orient. Poland was always situated in the east from the Latin West and to the west from the Greek east. And if we look at this situation of Poland, it has been for thousands of years. And if we look at this cultural situation of Poland, we can see as the in-between space where the processes of absorbing or assimilating and at times of diluting or annihilating cultural influences from both the West and the East incessantly take place to eventually contribute to a creation of its own hybrid model of an in-between culture, but in a good sense of the state of that in-between, because it's the space which can mediate the East to the West and the West to the East in turn. So I consider this particular placement of my country as a very fortunate placement, which is devoid at present also of any historical resentments of colonial or post-colonial situation. It is enough to add to this short remark of mine that, I would say that it will be very difficult to find a Sanskrit scholar of Polish origin who would use Sanskrit for political purposes, or who would consider Sanskrit studies in the colonial context. So I would say that this is a very big advantage of our studies in general. But now let me turn to the main theme or topical theme of my of my meeting. So let me start with the cultivation. So when I first heard about the topic, the suggested topic of the webinar, the status of cultivation of Sanskrit as a language in Poland and in India, I started thinking about what it could mean to cultivate Sanskrit as a language in my country. So, of course, I went to check the meaning of the word, which at first I just took for granted. Well, to cultivate means to tend, no, nothing more. And then I consulted the online etymology dictionary and the Polish language dictionary as well, and found that the noun cultivation derives from the verb cultivate, obviously. And first it was recorded in the 17th century to be used as related to land. So the English cultivate derives from Latin cultivus, which means tilled, and it comes from Latin cultus, which means care and labor. And these meanings I find rather meaningful in the context of cultivating Sanskrit. So the two Latin words, cultus and cultivus, can be referred back again to a verb cholera, to cultivate, of course, to till, to inhabit, to frequent, to practice, respect, tend, and guard as well. So these additional cloud of words which we can associate with the ideas of what it means to cultivate, add to our understanding of how we can cultivate Sanskrit in Poland. And the most interesting information, at least for me, which I found in the etymological dictionary, was a hypothetical source or evidence for existence of such a hypothetical source of the Latin cultus or cultivus, which is supposed to be connected with the Sanskrit chakram, circle or wheel, or charati, he moves or wanders, or Greek kyklos, a wheel and a circular body, a cycle of events, or Lithuanian kelias, a road, a way, and finally with the Polish koło, also a circle and a wheel. So, to sum up this short research on etymology of cultivation, it is derived from the verb, which is primarily related to the agricultural context. And it means to prepare land and grow crops, or to grow a particular crop of plant or plant. But cultivation has also a more figurative sense, and it can mean trying to develop and improve something by labor or study or care, as I have mentioned earlier, or to devote one's attention to. So in that sense, we as individuals, we can attach to cultivation very many different activities and attitudes. We can cultivate, for example, a growth of positive mindset or good habits or relationship or friendship. A nation can cultivate many things, such as its economy, its culture, democracy, security, and environment. Indeed, different nations may have different priorities and strategies to cultivate these aspects, depending on their history, geography, resources, and values. So, digging into the sense of cultivation inspired me to think about this activity in relation to practicing and to grow and care and protecting something. So I think that we can interpret the act of cultivation of Sanskrit in Poland in general to mean upholding its status as a linguistic carrier of unique values and universal unique values as well, both which can sometimes turn to appear to be both unique and universal. Into this subject I do not want to dwell because I don't have much time for that. And of course we can then to cultivate Sanskrit in the sense of upholding its rich literary, religious, philosophical, and scientific traditions of India. It can also mean taking a certain course of path for this course, as in the Lithuanian path or way, and to do it for the purpose of guarding or literally tending the language. This requires stability and, metaphorically conceived, fertilization, be it in the form of institutional or political support at present, or a solid ground for the discipline established in the past. So, to cultivate Sanskrit in Poland, we should also be able to relate to the vast area of Sanskrit studies, to relate the vast area of Sanskrit studies to the present, so that the Polish society in general and our students in particular do not perceive it as something completely abstract and antiquated. And of course, to do that, we can do it only in the academic environment. Sanskrit cannot be cultivated in Poland on the national level as it can be done in India still. Sanskrit is not directly related to our history or culture, despite the Enlightenment and Romantic efforts to prove otherwise in Poland, of course. I would say that the most important aspect of cultivating Sanskrit in Poland is not to allow the chain of teacher, student, academic transmission of knowledge related to this language be broken. So this is also the reason why I decided to let us have a glimpse on the past of the Krakowian Indology, a short glimpse, and relate it to the potential directions in which Sanskrit studies can be safeguarded in the future by means of researching into areas of interest of our Sanskrit students. So when it comes to the past of the Krakowian Indology, we need to know, it was already mentioned by the president of the Asiatic Society, but it was actually the best established and the first established academic center for Indian studies in Poland. And we have started teaching the first Sanskrit grammar lectures in the years of 1860 and 62. And so since then, of course, then there was more formal ways of establishing Sanskrit chair and Indology or Indian studies. But I would say that maybe it is very important in this context to mention three personages related to our Indology studies in general. And these are Professor Helena Wilman-Grabowska, Professor Andrzej Gawroński, and Professor Tadeusz Pobożniak. Professor Helena Wilman-Grabowska was the first full woman in the history of Jagiellonian University to receive the title of full professor in 1937, and she lectured in the Paris Sorbonne, and she is actually the originator of the modern Polish Indology. And she was not only an excellent researcher and teacher, but was also a very good manager, not sparing her own time and money to create the best center for Indian studies at the Jagiellonian University. She expanded our Indological library and Sanskrit studies as well by introducing lectures on India's cultural, economic, and social issues, introducing the curriculum on the history of Buddhism, the Pali language, modern Indian languages, among them the ones belonging to the Dravidian family. A brilliant linguist who knew more than 100 languages, Professor Andrzej Gawroński, started giving Indological lectures in 1913 at the Jagiellonian University, and then he became a professor of Sanskrit philology. And he is the author of the first Sanskrit textbook in Polish, which is still used in Poland, and in that sense certainly deserve at least acknowledging the fact that until now Polish students learn from his textbook of Sanskrit. And Professor Pobożniak, also a linguist, was the one who introduced Hindi language in 1970 and revived also Indology after disruption by the communist regime. So, of course, when we just have a short glimpse at the past of the Indology department, we can see that it was constituted of the philologists in a very good, not the antiquated sense, but in a very good sense of the word philology as studying culture via the means of language. And for that purpose, our past teachers paved the path of our tradition. And I think the tradition is continued. And they were also not only philologists or linguists, but they were also polymaths interested in vast areas of subjects related to Indian studies. And this is also continued at present times. I can be quite certain that this is a true statement about the present situation. But now let's try and look at the possible future developments of some insights regarding the developments of Sanskrit studies that can be perceived when collecting the areas and the topics of MA and BA dissertations. I was not touching the PhD dissertations and the topics because I think they are already quite mature researchers, the PhD students. But I wanted to have a look at the BA and MA students' dissertations because they are, I would say, the most they can give the most unexpected results when you look at those topics. So I have collected the topics of our students' dissertations from the years 2007 to 2021, which is about 15 years. And I have selected topics of the students' dissertations under the headings of Sanskrit classical, Sanskrit literature and poetics. And another heading is contemporary reusing and adaptation of Sanskrit literature, mythology and religion. Then Sanskrit religion and philosophy, also Sanskrit science and mathematics, Sanskrit culture and society, comparative and linguistic studies. And within these topics, a very broad range of topics, sorry for this. One can see, for example, such examples as the realization of the Vira and Raudara rasa, the tastes of anger and heroism in the Kathakali theatrical tradition on the basis of Bhagavatham play. This is in classical literature and poetics. Or the concept of blemish in Indian culture, or the literary landscape in the poem Kokila Sandesha of Udandas Shastri, so the contribution to the research of Dutta Kavyachandra. Now, when it comes to contemporary reusing and adaptation of Sanskrit literature, mythology, and religion, there are such dissertations as mythology and epics told over and over, selected examples of contemporary adaptation of Hindu mythology and epics in Indian fantasy literature, modern Indian fantasy literature. Structure and symbolism in the 25th Vetala story from Vetala Panchavinshatika, an attempt at modern interpretative reading. Now, Sita in contemporary retelling the Ramayana, or computer game as a text of culture, an image of India in the game Unrest. And then Sanskrit religion and philosophy, Under this heading, there are topics that deal with the study and comparison of various schools and tradition of Sanskrit religious and philosophical thought. And it also includes topics that explore concepts and practices of Sanskrit spirituality and concepts such as dharma or karma or moksha or bhakti or yoga and ritual. And some examples of this category are selected philosophical questions in the hands of the Atharva Veda, or characteristic features of Kamya rites according to chosen tantric scriptures, or the extraordinary capacities, Siddhi, according to Patanjali, an attempt of interpretation, or name in Bhakti tradition. Now, when it comes to Sanskrit science and mathematics, we have topics that deal with history and development of various branches and methods of Sanskrit scientific and mathematical knowledge, such as astronomy or astrology, medicine, grammar, logic, linguistics. And here we can, for example, see dissertations concerning mental disorders of the Unmada type in the Ayurvedic medical system, or comparison of Ayurvedic three-dosha concept and the Hippocrates humoral theory, or Ayurveda on the mental equilibrium. When it comes to Sanskrit culture and society, we can find such topics as sati in selected Indian normative texts, in the Mahabharata epics and in the European accounts, or syncretism of Hijra beliefs, or Durga Puja in Bengal in historical and cultural perspective, or the systematization of the spy institution in the Arthashastra. And in the area of comparative and linguistic studies, we have a comparative analysis of selected Polish versions of Vatsyayana Malanaga Kama Sutra and Sarangi and Cello, a comparison of two musical words, or supporting methods of interpreting Sanskrit text, mode of operation, and different types of application for automatic translation. So now, after this quite a good number of categories and of examples of the works which can be subsumed under these categories, let me now briefly analyze the data. And I shall do that in a threefold manner, which is partly inspired by the approach of Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the author of The Black Swan, or The Impact of Highly Improbable. And Taleb, according to him, there are two possible ways to approach a phenomena. The first is to rule out the extraordinary and focus on the normal. The second consists in considering the extremes, particularly if they carry an extraordinary cumulative effect. So to Taleb's normal and extreme or extraordinary, I added a third category, which I placed between the two extremes from Taleb's approach to view phenomena. So focusing on the normal topics of students' dissertation, we can focus, on the normal topics of the student's dissertation, the most related to the most chosen areas of Sanskrit studies. We can focus on topics which are as if in between the poles of the normal and the extreme topics, and we can consider the topics which are unique or singular or extraordinary. So among the normal, in the inverted commas, of course, topics of the students' dissertations, there are various aspects and dimensions of Sanskrit culture and society, such as art, music, dance, architecture, geography, history, politics, law, ethics, gender, caste, class, etc. They also include the topics that explore the diversity and complexity of Sanskrit culture and society, as well as the interactions and transformations of Sanskrit culture and society in different times and places. And these normal topics, normal in inverted commas, show that they are relevant to traditionally perceived trends and issues of Sanskrit studies, And they are also strongly influenced by the philological approach in the very good sense of the word, of, as I mentioned, studying culture via the language. They are also connected to related disciplines and to research areas of the promoters, which is quite understandable. They are also feasible and manageable with clear objectives and methods. Then they can be tentatively interpreted as showing constant interest in these areas of studies among Polish students. There is also a visible tendency to write about topics related to traditional medicine and yoga. Such topics can supply stability and continuation to the discipline of Sanskrit studies in Poland. Now, the second, the in-between approach, which is neither normal, so to speak, nor extreme. So I think that they mostly cover the topics that appeal or engage the students in particular, and so can be understood as opening new vistas in the study of widely understood Sanskrit tradition. They present new perspectives on old issues. They are also, as I mentioned, directly related to the interests of the students outside the field of their studies. For example, computer games or contemporary retelling of classical, mythical, or epic literary figures or motifs. And they, in that way, they bridge the past to the present. Such topics can be seen as game changers for the future of Sanskrit studies at our university. And then we have the unique, the singular, and the extraordinary. And I would say I had no major difficulties in singling out one such topic. And that was I don't know if I can mention the name of the author because of the RODO, which is in Poland a law very strictly observed. But it is the student who was both a mathematician and a Sanskrit student, and she has written a work on the system on selected Indian system of expressing numbers using Devanagari letters and Sanskrit words. And she has enumerated, I don't want to enter into the detailed description of her studies, but as Katarzyna, the name I think I can say, herself wrote in the description of her dissertation, its aim was to present and compare selected Indian systems used to express numbers with Devanagari letters or Sanskrit words. And at the first glance, the topic seems to be abstract. Yet, I think that it is extraordinary in that sense that it can demonstrate how these systems reflect the creativity and ingenuity of Indian mathematicians and astronomers on the one hand, but on the other hand, they show how they may influence other fields, be it musicology or poetry or even cryptography. So in that sense, I think this particular subject was absolutely singular and unique. Well, to sum up my presentation, I think that Krakowian Indology is rather fortunate in the sense that the established tradition of the past is continued by the present teachers. And it is also fortunate in the sense that it opens up new perspectives of Sanskrit studies research. We seem not to be deaf either to the voices of the past nor to the present interests. It may give us a certain optimistic perspective on the future of Sanskrit studies at my university, but I can also be altogether mistaken about the matter. And, well, I think that in Taleb's words, I can also say that in spite of my academic presentation of the linkages between the past and the future and the present to a certain extent when it comes to Sanskrit, cultivation of Sanskrit in my department. There suddenly may appear among the white swans of optimistic evaluations and possible directions, one black swan of the lack of the interest of educational policy in Poland to continue these studies. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm sorry I couldn't present the topic on my own slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Helena. That was really very intense, and there's so much of information. And I was like a diligent student trying to fathom everything. And it's like, but it's again very interesting to see so much of interest for for Sanskrit as a language, which was the formal education was established in the 1800, but it is still continuing, and the students are looking forward to learning. And in fact, there has been several visits to India by students from a university, from time to time. So they have actually gone and looked into the basic aspects of where Sanskrit study is done. So it's very interesting. And I think what your university is doing, what you are doing through your Department of Indology, it's fantastic. And trying to promote a language which is important, which is something a lot of people do not understand, but its importance, its values are, I think, very relevant in today's modern world also. So thank you very much again, once again, Helena. And ladies and gentlemen, she's a dear friend of mine in Poland, and I look forward to meeting her, and of course, Professor Iona, when I am in Poland next. Yes, Dr. Chakravarti, you wanted to say something?
Mr. Roy, you arranged for a trip to Asiatic Society once.
Sorry?
You arranged for a trip to Asiatic Society once.
Of course. That is on the radar. Actually, probably sometime next year when we are having some other programs through the other centers and all, we will have something. And as the Charge DF has mentioned, that this is going to be the 70th year of the diplomatic relations between India and Poland. So I'm sure there would be various programs and other things which will enable them to come and visit, and we should definitely have programs that way. So thank you very much, Helena, once again. And I would now request, we are running a little short of time because our webinar is supposed to end at 4, but it's okay. I mean, it's so interesting that I couldn't even nod my head or say anything. But now I request Professor Iona Miletsva to make a presentation. She is the associate professor from the Department of Languages and Cultures of India and South Asia. I think the same department, same Institute of Oriental Studies, Jagiellonian University in Krakow. And again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read out her extensive resume, but she's going to talk about the cultivation of Sanskrit and its literature in Polish sources from the past. So basically, it's to the past to the future, from the past to the future. Thank you. Over to you, Professor Iona.
Good afternoon and good morning. I hope you hear me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So obviously, first of